Welcome to the Whiskey with Winners podcast, the show with business titans sharing their stories of the highs and lows of entrepreneurship. Sit back, relax, grab your favorite glass of whiskey, and listen to the real and raw stories of these industry leaders. Now, here's your host, the man, the myth, the legend, the most interesting marketer, Jacob Fail.
What's up, everybody? It's Jacob Fell, the most interesting marketer, CEO, and founder of Brute Media Group here. And today we have an awesome entrepreneur on our show. We have Rivas, who is the CEO of Rivas Real Estate. He's also the CEO of Instant Leverage, where he helps you get virtual assistants for your business. And he's been featured on News 3 Channel, CBS, the Huffington Post, and tons of other places. He's helped over 500 entrepreneurs, coached them over 47 countries. Welcome, JR. How's it going, man?
Hey, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. Awesome to have you here. So I wanted to dive in a little bit into your backstory. I know that you were brought up by a single mom. So if you can talk about that and tell people where you came from and how that you got into this business.
Yeah, man. So I was born in New York City. And by the time that I was 12 years old, we'd lived in like 6 different states.
Jeez.
Lived in New York, New Jersey, Tampa, Colorado, Pennsylvania, and Nevada.
Wow.
So just kind of moved around. Everybody asked like, hey, were your parents in the military? No, we just, when you're poor, you just move around a lot. It's like something that happens. I don't know. I mean, at a young age, I just knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur because I just had like an epiphany one day. And I remember like being in high school and just realizing that most people don't make that much money. And even if you go, I remember like breaking down and thinking like, 50 grand a year, that's so much money. And then I like broke down, okay, so I don't know, I was just intuitive. So I like went on century21.com and I looked up some houses, and on that site, it shows you like what the mortgage payment would be. And it's like, oh, well, this house, the payment's like, $3 grand a month. And I'm like, well, 50 grand a year, that's like $4 grand a month. And then there's like taxes and living and car. And I looked at the car, and between the house and the car I wanted, I was already, in debt at that point. So I was like, this doesn't make sense. So I was like, well, who is like making all the money out there? And I realized that it was the people who owned everything. And I remember just having the realization one day where I figured out that driving down the street, everything that you see is owned by somebody. Like it was somebody's idea, and they decided to put that pizza place there. And somebody decided to build the place where the pizza place goes. And I just realized like, okay, everything's a business. So I need to be one of the people that are controlling these things, not one of the people that are like working in them. So I started to reach out to, just like I remember at one point I saw this mansion. It was like a $2-3 million house. Yeah. And I just knocked on the dude's door and I was like, hey, what do you do? Yeah. And he wasn't home, but there's 6 people who worked at this house. Oh, wow. And so he was like, this guy had like started a night vision technology company and sold it to the military for like $100 million. So, anyways, like I just was always super inspired by stuff like that. So at 18, I started a tax business, and long story there, and like how I was able to do that. We can dive into if you want. And then eventually I started a marketing agency. I started helping marketing agency owners. And now I've transitioned to a full-time real estate investor, and we buy and sell apartments and smaller multifamily as well. So that is our goal is 1,000 units in the next 3 years right now.
Wow, that's a hefty goal. That's awesome. I do want to dive into the tax business a little bit because my mom actually has a tax business. So I kind of want to talk a little bit about that. So you were fresh out of high school. I mean, in high school, you kind of had that realization like, hey, money's like the money math doesn't make sense here. I want this nice house, I want this nice car. Like, how am I going to be able to afford that? Right. And especially coming from your humble beginnings, like seeing that, like, did you have that realization there? Like, there's got to be a different way. And like, I know that it's got to be like entrepreneurship is the way for me to get to where I need to be from there.
Yeah. We had a career day one time in high school,
Yeah.
and the guy that came in, he gave us like a list of all the careers and all the common careers and like how much they made.
Yeah.
So I go to like the, how much they make column, and the only three careers that even made decent money was like doctor, lawyer, engineer.
Yeah.
And I had like a 2.4 GPA graduating from high school or whatever. I was like, well, I'm not going to do any of those things. So I talked to the guy, and he was like, well, there's another option that's not on here. And I'm like, what is it? He's like, well, it's an entrepreneur. And he's like, it's what I am. And he's like, oh, I actually never went to school other than to learn how to fly my plane. And the guy actually wrote a book. It's called $2 to Happiness.
Yeah.
And it's about how he, started his journey with $2 in his pocket and all this crazy stuff.
Oh, wow.
But I remember that day I realized, he told me that I don't even know what his business was, but he told me that for years, all he did was like connect people who were like calling in. He would connect them. He sounded like some sort of like the first version of affiliate marketing, like someone would call for somebody and then he would connect them to like the proper business or whatever, and they'd pay him. So it was like before the internet.
Yeah. Wow.
So I was like, okay, cool. Like there has to be a way to, kind of start something else. And that just got me super curious. So the way I got into the tax business was, I was 18 and I was looking for like a business that I could start that, wasn't high overhead or whatever. And, I saw like to start a McDonald's, you need like $1 million liquid or whatever. So I was like, there has to be something out there that I could start like cheap.
Right.
So I landed upon a tax business because my friend's mom owned one. And she told me like her rent was like $800 for the tax business. And then she just needed some computers and some software. And I was like, okay, I could probably like, get a real job and save up for like a year, just save like half of everything that I make. Because at the time I was making like $12 an hour. And then by saving half of everything I make for a year, I could save up enough money to start a tax business. And I didn't even know how to do taxes. So I was just like, I'll figure that part out. I'll figure that part out later.
That's a true entrepreneur right there. It's like,
yeah. So I was just like, it can't be that difficult, because I knew that people that did taxes most of the time, they weren't accountants. They were just, people who learned how to do taxes. So I just knew it wouldn't be that difficult. So, I started working at a place and I learned how to do taxes by taking a tax course. And I worked for a guy for a year, and then I actually ended up buying one of his locations. He had 3. Nice. And I actually read a book. I read actually Donald Trump's book, The Art of the Deal. Yeah. And this was like in 2013. And it's a really good book on like how he negotiates and gets what he wants and stuff like that. So I used some of those principles to like negotiate a deal with the guy where I didn't have to put up any money. I had to put up a little bit of money up front. Yeah. And basically I would have to pay him in installments over the course of like 4 years. And the first installment would be due after the first tax season. So basically I like owner financed the business, and I did like a 0 down scenario. So I was just like, it's kind of funny because that's like what we do now in real estate. Right. And I just like naturally I don't know. It just had a feeling like this might work.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how I got into the tax business.
Nice. And then you grew that to eventually you purchased those 2 other locations, right? So you had three locations total. And then did you just exit from those? You sold those, or?
Yeah. So the same guy came back to me after the first year, and he was like, hey, do you want to buy the other 2? And I was like 19 years old. So I was like, yeah, like I'm going to be a billionaire, tax tycoon. Right. And so I ended up buying those, and it was super hard. Like three locations, 53 employees at 19 years old. It was just insane. So I sold 2 of the locations. Actually, I sold all 3 the very next year. I sold one to my buddy. Um, I sold two as a package, and then I moved to Virginia Beach and I bought another tax business there. So then I did that for like a year, and I just could see that people really weren't doing their taxes, and they were starting to decline in terms of doing their taxes in person at like a brick and mortar office. The IRS releases data every year on the growth of in-person preparation versus online versus self-filing and all this stuff. So I saw that in person was had flatlined for like the last 2 years, and online had grown. So I just saw, I was like, this isn't going to be like, I'm not going to do this for the next 20 years or whatever, because everybody's shifting online. Like me personally, I get my taxes done now by like a CPA that I've never even met in person.
Yeah.
So I just knew like the traditional retail tax business where you like come in like H&R Block style. I just knew that was dying, and
Right.
H&R Block's been declining now. From like, they used to 18% of all like in-person tax returns used to be done at H&R Block. Now it's like 12% or something like that.
Oh,
So yeah, and it's taken a big hit, and I just was intuitive enough to know like, I need to get out while like I still can.
right. Well,
Um,
you saw ahead of the curve, and that's always the best thing, is trying to see around that corner before the downturn happens. Now, how was that for you, being 19 or 18 and managing three locations with 53 employees? Like, what was that? Did people respect you as the boss at that age, or like how did that turn
Yeah,
out?
yeah, they did. I was the youngest person, and I just kind of, I don't know. I just always learned like age is, like the saying goes, age is just a number.
Right.
It's more about like, how you carry yourself. If you have respect for yourself, people have respect for you. If you don't let things slide, they just, look at you as their boss. So my oldest employee was like 63 or something.
Yeah.
And he was just like this cool old dude, and he was like, "Hey man, I'm really, proud of what you've done or whatever." But it was just like, I was just a boss employee relationship.
Yeah. That's awesome. Now, speaking of that, like, how did you transition from that into digital marketing? Because I mean, those are two totally different sectors, from going from having three brick and mortar businesses to going online. What was that process like for you?
Yeah, so I sold the last tax business, and then I was like kind of looking for like what to do next.
Mhm.
And I started to just get interested in, I've always wanted to do like digital marketing. So I started to get interested in like Facebook ads and stuff like that. And at the time, that's when I met Dan Henry, because I had a podcast and he came on it, and he was very new in digital marketing as well.
That was
He
like
was
5 years ago, right? 6 years
yeah,
ago.
yeah. His Facebook ads program hadn't even like blown up yet. I was like the 11th person in that program. Now there's like, 5,000 or something. So so he had been doing Facebook ads for like his bar that he had, and then he had like a couple clients, maybe like 4 or 5 clients. And I was learning Facebook ads because my plan was to like find something to sell or like create a product or something, but I had like no idea what. And then eventually I was like, well, I don't have anything to sell, but other people do. So let me just try to like partner up with somebody and sell their stuff. So it was like the agency idea, but not quite yet. And I was just like working with anybody who would be willing to pay or whatever. Like my first client was like a payroll company and stuff. So it took me like 6 months learning curve. And I think so far, like everything that I've done, if I like go hard at it for 6 months, I end up figuring it out. Whether it's like, real estate's been about the same, although I don't feel like, I fully figured out the real estate game yet. But I figured out, how to find a deal, how to make an offer, what makes a good deal, a bad deal, all that kind of stuff in about a 6 month period.
Right.
So after 6 months, I landed my first like chiropractor client, and then within like a month, I had like 7 others, and yeah, that's how I ended up like figuring it out. So this was like late 2016.
Yeah. So then from there, obviously you progressed, and then you moved into the instant leverage, which is more of a supply company for virtual assistants for online marketers, right? So if you want to talk a little bit about that and kind of like how that transition happened and what was the epiphany there of seeing.
Yeah, so I had my agency, and people would just always ask me for advice, and then I started doing like one-on-one calls for like an hour for like, you know, $150 or whatever. And then I ended up doing like a master class that was virtual, and that went really well, and I was just kind of doing it on the side just for fun and whatever.
Right.
And eventually I had a live event that went super well. So then I launched a coaching program, and I was basically just helping people with their agencies. And eventually, I would tell everybody like, "Hey, you need to get a VA." It was like the first thing I told them, like day one.
Right.
And no one would really ever listen to me. So then I was like, "What if I just make the VA part of the offer and raise my price?" So I was like, "Let's just try. The next person we get on the phone, we're just gonna offer it to them."
Right.
And then figure out like how to fulfill it later. So we offered it, and the guy took it, and I was like, okay, cool. Like, you know, 1 for 1. So we ended up making it part of our formal offer, but we didn't change our marketing yet until we, once I had like really like proven the concept, then I like rebranded everything about the VA, and that's when the offer really like took off. So, I ended up, that's what I got the 2 Comma Club award for, was running the VA agency, where basically we just find, train, hire, place the virtual assistants with marketing agency owners, and they would do like lead gen for the marketing agency owners and help them book more appointments. So, yeah.
That's awesome. So instead of outbound for the client, it's mainly internal to book more appointments for the agency owner, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because a lot of people now, they're mainly doing the outbound stuff like the ISA type deal inside. So that's good to know, because I don't think a lot of people are providing that service right now. And at least from what I've seen, internally booking appointments for the agency. So that's awesome that you found that hole in the market and you plugged it. So moving forward from that, so now you're obviously going more into the real estate space. So I know that you talked a little bit about your goal that you wanted to get to 1,000 units, and I know you're partnering up with one of my mentors, Joel, and just kind of tell us a little bit about that and like what you guys are planning to do over the course of time. So is it mainly apartment complexes? Are you doing single family at all, or is it just solely?
Yeah, we have a couple of single families now.
Yeah.
But I feel like, you know, to reach your goal, it's going to take forever, you know, one door at a time.
Yeah.
So I like to reach our goal, I'd need to buy one single family home every day for the next 3 years. So that's just, you know, probably not going to happen. So I quickly realized that multifamily, I'm just more passionate about. And I think single family is cool if you're like a part-time investor and you have your thing and you just want to accumulate 10 real estate properties over the next 10 years or whatever, and that's going to be your retirement. But I'm a professional investor. Like, this is what I do every day, full time. Right. So I have the time and energy to talk to brokers all day and shop these big multifamily deals and underwrite them and do the due diligence and stuff that just takes a lot of time. So I think it just makes a lot more sense. I'm not like, I love Grant Cardone and everything, but he tells everybody, you know, don't do single family. And I think that it depends. It depends on what you want. Depends on the risk is a lot great. Like it's very, very hard to like lose your shirt on a single family deal because there's just not too much stuff that can go wrong. Like the HVAC could go out, the roof could go out, but I mean, it's not like it's random. Like roofs have a time period. So if you're buying a property and the roof's 18 years old and the life expectancy is 21, you know, like, okay, it's going to need to go soon, but it's not like your roof's just going to collapse one day out of nowhere. So, you know, as long as you get it inspected and they'll let you know, even if there's like a foundation issue, usually those aren't even that serious. So there's just not a whole lot of ways that you could get hurt. Now, if you jump into a 32 unit or a 64 unit and you don't know what you're doing, then, you know, I heard a story where this guy, so here's a perfect example. My first deal, the lady wasn't, I don't know if she wasn't collecting rent or she was just lying, but basically the second we bought it, it was a 2-unit. One of the tenants never pay. One of the tenants moved out right away. And then the other one didn't pay rent at all. And this was like, you know, middle of COVID or whatever. So so she ends up not paying rent, and then it takes like 3 months or whatever to get her out. But because it was, you know, she's paying like $950 a month or something, it's not a huge deal. I heard a story from another guy who he was buying like a 64 unit, and the financials that he got looked pretty good. But then when he asked for proof of deposits, the seller started like hedging. And then it turns out that she finally like sent him the deposits, and it was like for half of what was on the financial statement. And then it basically came up that they were just letting tenants like not pay rent or like pay late. And she was like, oh, you know, the tenants are good people. They pay, like, you know, they'll end up paying, blah, blah, blah. And that mistake could have like bankrupted him if he had not caught it. So it's like something like that could be super harmful. But if that happens on a small scale, which I learned my lesson about like checking deposits and stuff like that, because who knows like how long it had been since that lady had paid rent. So I learned my lesson. So now I'm not going to do that again. But I learned on a small scale that's not going to, you know, harm me.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I always tell people too. If they're thinking about getting into real estate, like start off with like a triplex or a fourplex, because that's what I'm doing. Start off with a triplex and just like learn the ropes, because, you know, 4 units it's not going to bankrupt you if you get a couple things here and there. And especially where I'm at, like to replace a whole AC unit, it's super cheap because we use swamp coolers. And so because there's no humidity out here, it's like $150 for all the internals on the whole thing.
Nice.
Right?
Is like it's like $4,000 in Florida.
Yeah. ACs are like $4,000 to $8,000. Because I was asking about a conversion from going from swamp cooler to a regular AC, and it was like $8,000. Plus, it makes everything all staticky out here because there's no humidity in the air, so everything you touch, it zaps it. That's crazy. But yeah, I mean, just like doing stuff on a smaller scale and finding out like, okay, am I good at being a landlord? Like, do I want to be a landlord, or do I want to hire a property manager? Do I want to, like, what do you want to do and what's your end goal, right? So like for me, it's to get to 40,000 units by the age I'm 65 and sell it, you know, for a couple $2 billion. You know, that's my ultimate goal. But people, and plus there is a small barrier to entry, but a lot of people think that it takes a lot of money to get into real estate. But there's seller financing, there's subject to deals, there's FHA loans that people can get. Obviously, like the market right now is pretty crazy. Have you been seeing a lot of craziness happen in like with you buying big multifamily, or is everything kind of stable?
So yeah, so you mentioned seller financing, and we got a seller financing deal in March. We actually started talking to him in like November, and then it closed in March. And so you could still find it in this market. It was an amazing deal. It was 4 units, and the purchase price was $274, and we put down 13%, and he seller financed it, and 4% interest rate. So the interesting thing about that deal is I think he was getting like $2,700 a month out of those 4 units. So he was grossly like under renting it.
Yeah.
And we in the first unit, it was rented for $600. We just got $1,150 for it, and all we did was change the floors. The second unit was also rented for $600, and we just got $1,100 for that one as well. Nice. Literally just signed the lease, like gonna move in soon. And then the third and fourth unit, they're still rented below market, but they're supposed to move out here in September, and then we're gonna flip those and get $1,500 for one, and then probably 900 or so for the other one. So it's a perfect example of how I found that deal like pretty much the first week that I was like, oh, I want to be a real estate investor.
Yeah.
But the funny thing is, because I was so new, I didn't really recognize that it was a good deal.
Right.
So I like didn't even like call the guy back. Like I called him and when we chatted, but I was like, I don't think this is going to work. But then when I was in the area closing on another deal, I was like, let me go check that place out. And then I was like, it like hit me like how much of a steal this was. So we raised the rent. I mean, we're gonna raise the rent by almost $2,000 on the whole building.
Jeez.
And our mortgage payment to the guy is like $1,040 a month or something, or 1,140, something like that.
Yeah.
So so we're gonna be getting like 4,500 a month.
Wow.
So pretty crazy, but it just goes to show that there's still deals out there. And this guy showed me a stack of mailers. He's like, yeah, I get these all the time. People trying to like, buy my place.
Yeah.
But we were just right people, right time. He came through a Facebook ad that I ran in the area.
Yeah.
And he was just like, it was just the good timing. And that's a lot of what it is. Like the more people that you find, the more likely you are to find like a good timing, good deal, right deal situation.
So as far as that goes, how are you structuring the seller financing deals? Like how are you approaching these sellers and actually structuring the deal? So obviously you have a contract, get them to sign the contract, you get the deed. So like just walk us through what that first deal looked like for you.
So the first seller financing deal was basically, so the way that I worked was I just asked him a bunch of questions, when was the roof, how old is the roof, what year was the building, why do you want to sell, all these different things. And then I probably would do this differently this time, but we toured the property first, and then we asked him, would you be open to seller financing? Or there's different ways to put it. Would you be open to holding the note? Would you be open to terms? Would you be open to seller financing? Right. And we just say, the way that I phrase it is like, hypothetically speaking, if you were 100% comfortable with everything, would you be open to seller financing? So that way it's just a low pressure way to ask them. So that they don't think like, oh, if I say yes, I'm like, committed to this or locked in or whatever. So, once we asked him that, he was like, I really would like to just wash my hands of it, but, let me talk to my wife. And we didn't even talk interest rate or terms or anything like that. 2 days later, talked to him again. He's like, okay, what are you thinking? We're like, I probably could have negotiated better terms too, but he wanted 20%. We were saying, hey, we're thinking more 10%. Yeah. And he's like, okay, well, what interest rate? I think we threw like 3% at him at first. Yeah. But he said that he had recently gotten a note and it was like 4%. So he wanted to go with that. So we're like, all right. And what we did was we timed it with, you got to think like most people that own real estate are pretty old. So right. This guy was already 65 and he was still working and he planned to retire at 70. He was like he worked at Florida State University. And so I'm like, okay, he's probably not going to want to hold a note for 20 years when he's 65. So we said, hey, what if you just held the note for 7 years and we amortized it over 30, meaning you make the payment as if it was 30, but it's a 7-year note. And then at the end of those 7 years, you have to pretty much pay him off, which at that point you can refinance pretty easily, which we're actually looking at refinancing now because now is the time to lock down long-term debt at a low interest rate. So we have a 4% rate with him. We could probably do better than that and lock it down for 30 years rather than the next 5 years. So ultimately we settled on, he came down to 15%. We're like, give us like 5 minutes. Let me run some numbers and ran some numbers. And I called him back and I was like, we're really close. If you could do 13%, then let's make it happen. And he was like, all right, I think you have a deal. So we did 13% down, on 274, which I believe was like 31,000 or something like that. And then we did 4% interest, 5-year term, amortized over 30. So, and then now we're looking to refinance, pay him out. And the cool thing is, because of the market, right? Once we get these rents off up to 4,500, this building would probably appraise for around 550. So we're into it for 274. So you can pull out 70% of the value of the property in a cash out refi. So we'll be able to pull out 385, and we're only right now we owe about 240 on it. So we could, in theory, pull out like $100,000 more than what we bought it for. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then the cool thing about that is we might not pull out the full 385 because we still want a cash flow on it. But
Right.
in theory, what we could do is we would get $140,000 cash. We would still have our 4 units there with 30% equity. And then now we get back our initial investment plus a ton of money extra. And then we can go and do this 6, 7 more times over and over and over again. So that's the kind of like magic that I've found in real estate. It's like, it's a crazy thing. Like you can put money in, you can get all of it back and still keep the asset. Like craziness. I remember when I learned that, I was like, this can't be, I was like, this sounds too good to be true.
Monopoly for sure. And in real life, but that's the, Bigger Pockets talks about it. That's more of like the BRRRR strategy, right? Except for you're using seller financing, which a lot of people don't realize that because I just learned about another thing too, which is subject to, which is basically if they have the full mortgage still, you can just take over the note for them, kind of like if your uncle has a car and he doesn't want it anymore, he doesn't want to keep paying for it, he can just give it to you and you keep paying the note and right. So you can do seller financing subject to, or just a regular buy. And then the BRRRR method, you renovate it, you rent it, and then you refinance it, and then you repeat. And that's how you build long-term wealth, and you build it very, very quickly because you can pull that equity out really quickly. Because I mean, you guys, how long have you guys had that property?
Since March. So you need to hold it for 6 months typically.
Yeah.
And it has to be stabilized. So, rented.
Yeah. So, I mean, after 6 months, you're now able to pull out, 300, almost 400,000 if you wanted to. Right. And then you could take that 300 to 400,000 and go buy, a 30 unit or 40 unit or something like that. And just put money down on that. So like, that's how that you can grow this a lot quicker. And I don't think a lot of people realize that. And there's a lot of rules to the game that most people don't know, right? Like you can utilize a Roth IRA to buy investment properties, and you can do it tax free. You can also do like it's called infinite banking, and you can use a whole life insurance policy to invest in real estate assets. And a lot of people don't, like most normal people that are out there, hardworking individuals, they don't realize that they don't know the game, right? They don't know the rules of the game to even be in the game to play. And I think that that's a big thing that people should be more educated on the wealthy and how to build.
Yeah. And there's so many options. Like, for example, this deal, like someone might be listening right now and be like, well, that's cool, but I don't have, 30,000 to make that deal happen. Well, you easily could go out and get a private lender that's going to charge you, a shit ton of interest for a while, but you're only holding it for 6 months. So you could have got that 30,000 from the private lender and then now refinanced, paid him back, and had an extra 100,000 or 80 or 90,000 or whatever that you made on the deal. You have the property, you have secured long-term debt on it, and then now you made 90,000 or 100,000 that you can then go put somewhere else. Yeah. And these deals are out. I mean, that's been the best deal that I've found so far. Yeah. But I've been a full-time real estate investor for like 3 months, and this one I found even before that. So if you find one of these a year, I mean, you're in 10 years, you have 40 units, right? And you've made almost $1 million that you can then keep reinvesting. Yeah. So if you make your goal, find one of these a year, you'd be in good shape, right? And also the market's not always going to be how it is now. Like right now, it's harder to find deals because it's really easy for like your average dummy to go out and get a loan and, not have to put a lot down or whatever. So the market is getting bid up and everybody wants to sell because you're going to get the most amount of money of probably ever for your property. But the thing is, even in commercial, everybody wants to sell. So even if you have a 30 unit, you're like, well, if I sell it now, this is the most I'm ever going to get for it. But then that creates an issue because now you have to pay capital gains tax and nobody wants to do that. So they try to roll that into another deal through a 1031. Yeah, exactly. So that they can avoid paying capital gains tax. But the issue is you have to secure a new property in 45 days. So you're under all this pressure, and then you end up basically just paying 20 to 30% above market value for a shitty deal in order to avoid paying capital gains tax. So the market's it's definitely difficult right now, but I say, like, hey, if you can find a deal in this market, then you'll always be able to find a deal.
Yeah.
So it's never worth there's a saying that goes, don't wait to buy real estate and wait.
Yeah, 100%. And I love that. And the thing is too, is just getting in the game, right? Like just buying your first property, just get in there, buy your first property, whether it's your home that you live in or whatever, because eventually you'll pay down that note and then you can take out equity on top of that house. Like some of the houses over here, they've gained 30,000, 50,000, 100,000 in equity, but people don't realize that that's just free money that they're sitting on, that they can pull out that equity from their house and refinance it and then just invest that into multifamily, right. And I mean, I know you were talking about Grant Cardone earlier. Like the thing is, yes, 4 units or 16 units or 32 units can be expensive with maintenance and repairs and capital, expenses. But the thing is if you have 1 unit down, like, because with our triplex, we've had a couple of people move out and like we still have 1 tenant in there that's renting, right? So it pays the mortgage. And then whenever that person decides to leave, we've already got another person in this one, right? And so it's a constant back and forth. But once you find good tenants and you kick the old, the bad ones out, then, you have long-term sustainable growth and you're never relying on one stream of income because you have, 2, 3, 4 people paying the note. And then you're not, worried about it, right? So that's the biggest thing. And especially if they're new investors, just like for whoever's listening to this, if you want to get into real estate, do a FHA and buy a 4-plex. Like a lot of people don't realize you can do that. Get an FHA loan, 3.5% down. You can put down like 4 to 5 grand. And then now you have 4 units, you live in one. And then you got the rest, for everybody's paying the note down for you and you're not having to do anything. You live for free versus people like, why would you rent an apartment whenever you can be making $300 or $400 on top of that, or even $1,000 or $2,000, depending on where you live, and they're paying the note. You're getting it for free and you're cash flowing every month. Like it's crazy. So, and then another thing too, that a lot of people don't think of, and maybe this will be some value to you, is using coin operated washing machines and stuff, man. Like that stuff adds up, like having different things that are coin operated, or either having like a card reader on them and they use their card, or they use, coins to wash their, like a separate building where they go to wash their clothes. And especially with you guys getting into bigger multifamily, that's one way to raise things up just like that,
yeah. I mean, I was looking at an apartment deal today, and the coin laundry produced anywhere between $200 and $400 a month.
Yep.
So it doesn't sound like a ton, but in real estate, every dollar of net income is equal to $20 in value, essentially. So that that person might be only making $3,000 a year from that. But when they go to sell it, that adds a crap ton of value to the property for really, something that doesn't cost you anything, it's passive. It runs itself. And with the coin laundry, it allows, like I've seen the card readers there was a building that I was in Vegas, and they had the coin reader laundry for the whole building. And this place was probably like 250 units or something. And all day, like it was busy going. So I know they were making a lot more than like a couple $100 a month from that.
Yeah. Well, and if you can put a card reader on it too, you won't have the problems of like, the coins getting stuck and having to do maintenance and stuff on it. Plus, you can charge a little higher fee because you're using the card to take out that processing fee from that
Right.
as well, right? So instead of $1, you charge $1.50 or $1.25 or $2 or whatever, right?
Mhm.
So that's one thing that a lot of people don't think, and especially because I'm really wanting to get into like glamping and Airbnb and stuff. Utilizing one land and land hacking that. Like I was watching a video the other day. This one lady, she had 8 acres and she made $50,000 a month from
Wow.
her 8 acres. She had little tiny A-frame cabins. She had glamping tents. She had a wedding venue, and then she had her main house on it. And I think she had 10 of the little A-frame cabins, right? So like doing some type of land arbitrage like that to get your cash flow up. And some of the listeners might have several acres right now that they're not using, and they can build a back road going to, part of your land that you never even go to anyway, and you can make money off of that, right? So it's pretty crazy how quickly you can build wealth in real estate. Um, cool. Was there anything else with real estate that you wanted to dive into?
Yeah, I mean, another quick thing that people can do. I have a buddy who he does like room rentals, and what he does is he partners with people. So here's a challenge that a lot of entrepreneurs run into. You need 2 years of tax returns. They're a little bit stricter on lending to entrepreneurs. So my buddy is an entrepreneur. So what he does is he finds people that have really good jobs, maybe like software engineer, whatever, 80 grand a year, 100 grand a year, but don't really like invest in anything, or they still rent or whatever. And he gets them to take out the mortgage, and he puts up half of the down payment. And then the mortgage is in their name, but he's on the title, on the deed. And then they rent it out by the rooms. And he did a deal like that where he's making like $700 a month in profit, just renting it by the rooms. And he basically just does like young professionals. So it's not like he's renting to people with like good credit scores and they're in their 30s, they have decent jobs, they just for whatever reason don't want to own, or don't have the money for a down payment or whatever. So he's done that like 4 or 5 times now. And even in his own personal house, he rents out, it's a 4-bedroom, I believe, and he rents out the other 3 rooms. So he's making a profit doing that. And then he owns like 2 others on the block because he became the president of the HOA. So he owns 2 others on the block where he rents them out by the room as well.
Yeah, and that's especially good in college towns because I used to live in a college town, and in the apartment complexes there. So I mean, it was like probably a 200 unit apartment complex, but they would literally rent out the room of the apartment. So
Yeah,
it's 3 bedroom.
that's popular in our market in Tallahassee
Yeah.
because of Florida State.
Mhm.
You'll see a lot of weird stuff like that. Like you'll see like 4-bed, 4 baths places where all the bathrooms are in the bedrooms.
Yep,
And
exactly.
that's pretty common.
That's how ours was, and it was, I think we paid like 400, 500 a month. But if you look at the numbers, I mean, they're making, what they would make on a fourplex with one unit, right? So I mean, they're making 1,200 upwards of 2,000, depending on what the rents are for every single unit, and they had probably, I would say, 150 to 200 units, which is insane.
Yeah.
So that's just some creative ways to do it. Well, I want to talk a little bit. We're about to wrap up here. I want to talk a little bit about what your future goals are. Obviously, like the short-term goal in the next 3 years is 1,000 units. But what do you see in the next 3 to 5 years of what you guys are trying to accomplish?
So ultimately, I want to develop. Like I think that just development is super cool with like big apartment buildings. Like I live in lower downtown Denver, and like just looking outside my balcony, there's all these like really cool buildings that affect how people look at the city and how they feel about the city. And I just always think about this, like, and right across from me, I live right by a park, right across from a park in lower downtown Denver. There's a huge development happening. Like there's big cranes in the air and stuff. And I always just remember like this was just an idea in someone's head at one point, and they saw a plot of land and or they like looked for a plot of land, and they're like, I'm going to put this here. And then they had to go out and get like the city permits and get an architect and an engineer and all these contractors and put this together. And then it becomes like this building that's going to sit here for the next couple hundred years and can produce income for them every single month. So I think that building like big projects like this, like $100 million projects, $40 million projects, ultimately, that's what I want to do. Just because that seems really fun, and I'm all about like, keep going bigger and push yourself and stuff like that. So that's our goal over the next like 5 years, is to get into development. But for right now, we just want to conquer and dominate in the commercial multifamily space.
Awesome. Another thing too that I would look at, since you're wanting to get into the like development stuff, is doing like less than 99 units. Obviously it depends on states, but you can do subdivisions, like suburbs type stuff, and like sell those plots of lands and sell the custom built homes on that. And you make a ton of money on that. Yeah. They're doing a lot of new development here just like that. And the cool thing is, obviously depending on state, you don't have to have a realtor to sell those for you. You can actually just have a normal person that's titled a sales consultant that can sell those.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, because obviously it's dependent on state, but if it's less than 99 parcels, they can sell that. So,
cool.
Yeah. Cool. So last question for you is, if today was your last day, JR, what would you want to be known for? And what's one piece of advice that you could give?
Yeah. So this year on my birthday, all my friends got together, like it's 15 people or so, and they made a video, and it was like a little documentary on like who I am. Yeah. So basically everybody like saying like the impact that I've had on their life. And it was kind of cool because a lot of them like didn't watch each other's videos and said a lot of the same stuff.
Yeah.
So I realized that what I wanted to be known for is what I'm already known for. So some of the things that they said was like, I'm very inclusive of everybody, and I love life, and I bring a lot of, I care about people and stuff like that. So I think that being known for those things, which is interesting because none of the things that I was like known for like had to do anything with like money or real estate or business even. It was all just kind of like who I was as a friend. So I think that's what I want to be known for, just like who I am as a friend to the people who actually know me, and the impact and having impact on their lives.
Awesome. And then what's one piece of advice that you would give to people like today?
I would say I wasted a lot of time like playing small and I started out in real estate trying to find like a single family home or whatever. Whereas a lot of the times, like if you really think about it, I'm sure a lot of people have read the 10X rule or whatever. A lot of that stuff is really true. Like if you really think about it, it doesn't take that much more effort, if any more effort at all. And I've learned this too with apartment investing, is it doesn't, like the way that you get somebody to find an apartment or to sell you an apartment, it's the same stuff to get somebody to sell you a single family. It's like networking with brokers. With single family, you would just network with realtors. Doing direct mail, it's almost identical the way that you do direct mail for single family versus apartments. And yeah, like just being on top of the listings that come up, it's the same stuff. And with like my formula now, I can underwrite a multifamily deal that's 30 units in the same time that it takes me to underwrite a single family. And so it's kind of funny that soft underwrite, like there's a lot more to it.
Right.
Family. But it's just kind of funny how, like whenever I form a goal, like we always want to default to like the easiest thing that makes us feel like we're making progress. When a lot of the times, like to go for a 4 unit, it's not 4 times the work that it is to go for a single family. It's the same amount of work. If anything, it's probably less work because all the units are right there. So I would just keep that in mind. Like I would give that piece of advice to everybody. Like always ask yourself, like, are you playing small? Because a lot of the times playing big is it's just a decision to say like, hey, I'm gonna go after this bigger goal rather than go after this smaller goal. And when you look at people who've done like amazing things, like I have this book, it's called the Amazon. I think it's called the Amazon. I just started reading it. The Amazon letters, I think, or the Bezos letters.
Yep.
And in one of I haven't read the chapter yet, but I always like skim the table of contents and like table of content, and I read like some of the chapters, or I'll like, skim it a little bit. But one of the chapters is about how by simply like, there's no chance of you doing something great if you don't go after something great. Yeah. So it kind of talks about how, and I'll give you guys an update on my Instagram once I actually read the chapter. Yeah. But it just talks about how, like, Bezos set out to do something that was $1 billion idea. So right. The chances of reaching it are way higher than if you set out to do something that's $1 million idea. Right. So, and if you really think about it, it's like, does running the person that works at, let's say they own a single restaurant and they work there every day, that person probably works about as hard as Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk. They just chose to solve different problems. Yeah. So you're going to work anyways. You're going to put in the time and effort anyways. Why not put it into something that has a disproportionate reward, right? Because even if you run the best restaurant in Denver, the most you could be is maybe like a $2, $3, $4, $5 million net worth. But if you choose to, buy a 1,000 apartment units in the next 3 months, like you could have a $12 million, $15 million, 3 years, you could have a $12 million, $15 million net worth if you're successful with that goal.
Well, and to piggyback off of that, if you look at Sir Richard Branson, right, look at what he just did. I mean, he's been started from a young age investing in all these companies. He was very creative and started Virgin Atlantic and flew across, got people in the airport and said, hey, let's rent out this plane because I'm going to miss my flight. Who all wants to go? After his flight got canceled, and started that. And his ultimate goal was to take normal people to space. And 3 days ago, he did that. They flew into outer space. And I think he had 3 crew members with him, and they went weightless for a few minutes, and then they came back down and landed right on a runway. I mean, like that, like, just look at that as visionary. Like, he's always wanted to make space travel affordable, right? And for his new plane to do that, like, that's just incredible to be able to see the world from outer space. And it came from just a thought, right? So
right.
It's something to think about. Awesome. Well, it's been great having you, JR. So where can people find out more about you or reach you if they want to reach out maybe about investing or about some virtual assistance?
Instagram at the JR Rivas. So every Wednesday, I'm basically breaking down a deal for free. So if anybody has a deal that they want me to look at and give my opinions on, I'll break down the deal for you. I don't plan to ever do like any coaching or anything in the real estate space. I plan to just kind of give it all out for free. But the goal with stuff like this is, I know eventually we're going to raise money. So I'm building our reputation and our brand around being multifamily, commercial real estate experts, so that when it comes down to raising money a year from now or a year and a half from now, there's been people who have been watching me for a year and a half, and I've been, helping them buy deals. So when it comes down to investing in one of our deals, they're like, of course I'm going to do it because JR has been helping me for a year now.
Yeah.
So, if you have any deals you want me to look at, feel free to send it, and I'll review it. Every Wednesday, I'm reviewing at least one.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being on the Whiskey Winners podcast, JR. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Whiskey with Winners podcast, your home for real and raw stories of industry titans. Make sure to click the button below to subscribe. Follow our journey on Instagram at Most Interesting Marketer and Anchor, Stitcher, YouTube, iTunes, and Spotify. Remember to always stay humble, stay hungry, and stay focused.
Everything that I'm saying is out of context. Wait, it's not even really a contest. See, if you already know, then I'm next. Looking at a bodybuilder like Y-Flex. I'm dope in the pot like it's Pyrex. And I do it big just like a T-Rex. A T-Rex, I'm the best to ever do it. You know, could be so dope when he flow to the fucking music. Like, this shit is nasty for real. Yeah, I'm dope. You don't even have to ask me for real, man. Damn, I think I'm going wrong. I'm going hard. Woo. Who you know could come up with the bars? I'm a shooting star. I shine bright in the fucking night, and they can't tell me that I'm doing wrong. I do it right, like I'm at the top. So who you know could really top that? Yeah, and tune in to the podcast.